Hi everybody, my name's Charlie Turnbull. I'm assuming you know that, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this. Here we are doing a cheese masterclass on Sussex cheeses. I don't know if you know anything about Sussex cheeses. They are, where do we start? Well, Sussex on the south coast of England. Let's start there. Brighton is in the middle. The road to up London, the A23, M23, splits Sussex in half. We have the west, very sort of Chichester kind of way, all very nice down that direction. And then east, much more rural, even though you are going to be closer to London, out towards Kent, very much sort of the hinterland of Sussex. And if you live in Sussex, as I do, then there's a bit of a sense of, the East Sussex people don't like the West Sussex people. But, actually, it's a beautiful, beautiful county, or two counties. In fact, if you try and tell the Google or somewhere where you live, it wants you to choose between East Sussex and West Sussex. East Sussex has a fantastic history of, how do I call it, sort of bonfire societies. And if you ever head to Lewes, which has the biggest bonfire event in the whole of the UK on Guy Fawkes Night, it has the most astonishing and chaotic and frankly pagan bonfire event where they have these huge bonfires, and all the bonfire societies, and there are hundreds, or maybe 100, but an awful lot of them in East Sussex. They're all dressed in sort of Where's Wally striped jerseys, and they head down and they roll barrels of flaming tar down Lewes High Street, and all the shops there have to board up their windows. It's just great. It's great, and that is sort of what Sussex is about. This little county tucked under London, which everyone thinks is a bit nice and a bit posh, and in fact is chaotic and rich and old and embedded in Old English history. Now, what about the cheese, I hear you ask? Well, Sussex is a funny place for cheese because there isn't much, what's the right phrase? There isn't much continuous history of cheese making in Sussex. So there are fantastic, we're going to look at three of them, fantastic cheesemakers, but is there a history of cheese going way back? Now, I've looked into it around Glynde, where I used to live, which is just southeast of Lewes. There is, in the histories of Glynde Place, there histories of cheese making, but all that sort of predates the time when cheeses had real names and stuff, and that they were known outside their area. And if you look at the big cheeses of the UK, whether the big territorials of the north or the West Country, like cheddar and all that kind of thing, there was no signature cheese. Even Suffolk cheese was really, really successful for many, many years. North of London, Sussex, not so much. What are we known for? Well, Kent's the Garden of England, lots of fruit, that kind of thing. So I think we've just got to take it that we can invent our own history now. I love a bit of inventing history. So what about the topography of Sussex? On the south, against the river, we have, against the sea, we have those fantastic white cliffs that all go away to Dover, and they have the Seven Sisters, and it is iconic British scenery. If you see those sort of basically cut cliffs, those undulating corrugated iron white cliffs across the bottom of our country there, it screams England. It's amazing, and sort of very sort of sunshine and daisies and all that kind of stuff. And then you have the South Downs, which is a national park, beautiful bit of ground. Let's be honest, not the best ground. Which bits get to be national parks? It's the poor quality farmland in real terms, because if it was any good, it would be used for farming. So we have sheep and a degree of arable across that section there up above me here. I can see it out my window. There's a lot of corn being grown. But once you get into past the South Downs and coming up from the south into the body of East Sussex, a lot of grazing, a lot of woodland, very, very pretty ground. So we're going to start with Mayfield, which is in the top of East Sussex. In the town of Mayfield, or the village of Mayfield, we have Alsop Walker, which is 2008. Nick Walker and Arthur Alsop started making these cheeses. Oh, this is going to disappear on me. Can we get close and make it disappear? Okay, this is Mayfield. Now, Mayfield is quite a big cheese. So we're saying, I'm going to guess about 16 kilos, something like that. Maybe smaller than that. And it sort of has an Gouda style edge, but it's not a Gouda. It is a hard cheese, not a hard cooked cheese. And as we come to taste it, it does have that sort of sweetness we associate with washed curd cheeses, but it's still not really a Gouda. And the other really key characteristic of this is the holes. And Mayfield is Britain's best known holy cheese. Lots of holes. Depending on the particular batch you get, the holes can be, where's a knife here? The holes can be gathered to the bottom, gathered to the top. I find that Mayfield's holes move around. It's like, you know, they've got Google Maps and off they go. So sometimes you can collect at the bottom. The one I've got today, not so many holes at all. Propionic bacteria give holes. They are something that you would introduce in the starter, as in the culture that kicks off. And they, over time, release or generate carbon dioxide in the great metabolic cascade that creates flavor in cheese. The metabolic cascade, carbon dioxide is one of the very last and smallest particles that gets produced. Carbon dioxide, water, sulfur dioxide, all those tiny wee sort of single atom, but with oxygens and hydrogens attached down the bottom. And to get that, you need pretty solid time to make those things come out. Right. The other thing we need to know is, like Goudas, we have a plaster coat on Mayfield. Ooh, I thought it might peel off. It was going to peel off there a second. Plaster coat, as you guys all know, is a protected covering that they use. Lots of people use, from Lincolnshire Poacher to Gouda to Manchego. Lots of really great cheeses use plaster coat to provide a semi-permeable but protective covering during the maturation to make sure nothing gets in that we don't like. And just to prove the point, we've got a break in the plastic coat there, and you can see there is some incursion. What's that? Well, it looks a bit like, it doesn't smell like it. Looks a bit like cheese mite. So we've got something in there. That's what happens if you don't look after if your plastic coat doesn't form a full membrane. Right. So what are we thinking about this cheese? Now, okay, let's take something out. It breaks easy. It's wobbly. It's flexible. It's gooey. Now, this sort of reminds you vaguely of a young Gouda, but also you might think of it in that sort of Morbier style. And Morbier is a highly renneted cheese. These are look renneted to get the bonds between the curds working very well. And although I've never been to Alsop Walker, I think probably they may be heavy renneters, if that's the thing. It's very easy to eat this cheese. So that gives us this squidginess. So texture-wise, it's very pasty. Very pasty. Now, obviously, the more you age it, the firmer it's going to get. But it's got a sort of blue tacky kind of character, so I can easily shape it into whatever I want it to be. Just to prove that's still tasty, I'm going to eat that. The flavors, we'll go to taste first. So what am I expecting here? So youth. So I would like some of the dairy flavors to be on the creamy side. So I'm expecting a degree of sweetness, significant savoriness, saltiness, maybe, acidity, probably not, bitterness, probably not. Now, as it happens, I am getting vegetal bitterness. There's a kind of bitterness that really works in cheese. I think of it as that hoppy bitterness, that natural bitterness, almost that Osthouse kind of bitterness that you get around the country in different forms. And I think that it comes with hedgerows and herbaceousness, and that's kind of in this cheese. So the bitterness is there. So that definitely moves it away from that Gouda style. So, and as I said, I don't think it falls into that category. Sweetness, yes, there is a sweetness. It is definitely got a little hint of caramel in there, and there is a nuttiness. Now, I don't like the phrase nuttiness unless you can specify the nut, and I can't. So it's more that sweet, savory combo, but savory, not so strong either. So we're really getting that creaminess, that sweet milk flavors. In the dairy textures, we've talked about the milk. And I would suggest there is a cooked milk or a condensed milk flavor there as well, which is nice. And then there's definitely a butteriness, the butteriness, almost a fudginess as well. Good Lord. So quite a lot of dairy notes sitting in there. When you get 3 or 4 or possibly even 5 different dairy notes in any cheese, you begin to squeeze out the more subtle flavors. And you begin to get dominated by those dairy flavors. So we've got some strong creaminess, strong butter, strong milk, strong condensed milk, bits of fudge, all sitting there in there. Now, that bitterness that sits around those herbaceous notes, possibly even mild floral notes, that's there as well. But it's a buzz. It's not specific. I keep reaching for it with my flavoring, and I can't quite put my finger on it. I want to say hedgerow. I want to say the blossom of brambles, that kind of thing. But you know, if you were tasting with this meat, which you might be, I hope you are, you might go, what's he talking about? Is that really true? I know, it's quite moorish. Right. So good cheese. Wonderful, unique position within the British cheese universe. Nothing like it. Does it have a huge following? Yes, it does. Widely recognised. Obviously, Sussex does that. But it tends to come to market relatively young compared to the old Gouders. So that it doesn't have that highly complex section that really delivers on cheese boards against Gruyères or something like that, which it might be a substitute for. What it delivers is sunshine, light, brilliant sort of lunchtime fare. This is a fantastic go-to cheese for creating a really good cheese board. It pairs brilliantly with your apples, your tomatoes, your chutneys. Those all love this cheese. So its peak performance is on that lunchtime plate where it's making friends with other non-cheeses. Right. Dun, 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 dun. Now, favorite beer of mine, absolute favorite beer, not all-time favorite, but like, you know, top 5. And those beer lovers out there who think this is a bit mainstream, well, I'm really sorry. I am a bit mainstream when it comes to beer. I like my beers slightly flat. That's not flat at all. Slightly flat, but this is out of a bottle, obviously. Slightly fat, darker in colour, small bubblynesses. Can you see that? Yeah, small bubbles. And a slight hoppy colour to the butter. The bubbles mustn't be too white for me. Now, this is bottle fed, so it is more carbonated than something pulled out of the tap. But otherwise, this is just old school beer. Sussex Best is the leading Harvey from Harvey's Breweries in Lewes. You can go and visit it. It's right in the middle of the town centre. I walked past it today on my way to get myself a sauce roll. And it does really good tours. So I really recommend it. And they have Harvey's shop, and you can get Harvey's beers also. So if you're in the area, please go and have a look. So it talks about Maris Otter malted barley, which is very, very sort of mainstream, and a dash of crystal malt. Who knew that? Well, there you go, crystal malt. But it's darker, it's richer, it's got more base notes, not so much sweetness. So I'm going to try it with this. No, I don't think that's working for me. Oh no, maybe it does. So the flavor of the bitter tends to wash over the cheese, but actually the cheese then because it's sticky and it sticks around the teeth, comes back and pushes the bitter back again. So it's like a tide ebbing and flowing. You get the cheese and the bitter, the cheese and the bitter, and both of them do quite nicely. So actually, I think one would. I think it might prefer a slightly drier cheese like a cheddar, but actually the sweet stickiness of the cheese actually is quite a nice counterpoint. Two very good Sussex products. Awesome. Right. Right. Next cheese up on our Sussex cheese board. I'm going to hold my Pevensey Blue back for last because I'm really excited about this. It's not a cheese I know terribly well. So we're going to move to Golden Cross here. Now, Golden Cross is close here to Brighton. It's not very far away. And it is a high award winner. So how to describe soft ash goat's milk cheese? It is definitely in the Loire Valley Saint-Maud terrain vibe, which means it's whatever that is long, sort of, is that 6 inches maybe? A 6-inch length log, extremely well wrapped as it happens. There we go. In this semi-permeable brie paper style paper. Nice simple wrapping on there. And it comes out looking quite white, as this one does. However, if you interrogate the colour, can you see there? There's a darkness to it. There's a dark side to this cheese. And what we'll do, we'll see if we cut into it, is we'll find that inside it, there is evidence of ash that forms a sort of halo ring. Almost like an eclipse. Can you see that in there? So what we're seeing there is the initial light ashing or sandra or charcoal, ground charcoal that goes on the outside that protects the cheese as it's developing its first molds. What a beautiful cut that is. Don't know why I'm not getting so much light. Let's see if we can get a bit better there. Anyway. Maybe I should try and find a different light. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I'm going to cut that. It's funny, these cheeses. So I'm not a huge fan of goat's cheese for myself. I recognize that they are amazing cheeses and amazing cheesemongers, but when I choose them for myself buying cheese board, I don't really like it that goaty. I'm not a full any goat kind of, doesn't work for me, but I like the cheeses that are less goaty, and that is why I've chosen this cheese today. So, right, there you go. Right, so we've got a very clean, very simple, not fluffy. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So when I scrape it, what we don't get is a fluffiness, which is what you would get if you tried with a Saint-Maur Touraine, which Saint-Maur Touraine is halfway down the Loire, north side, one of the great 4 PDO cheeses of the Loire, made out of cheese, and are the inspiration of literally, in fact, now I think about there are 5, almost all goat's cheeses that are small. So you have the Seltzer, which is a little puck shape. You have the Saint-Maur Touraine, which is this shape. And you have the 2 pyramids, the Valençay and the Poulini, which are, the pyramid shaped with the Valençay has its head cut off. And then you have the crottin, the balls, the great source of inspiration. This one is a copy of one of them, but what I love about the really great cheesemakers such as we have, such as Golden Cross are, is they take the inspiration and run with it and create their version of it. And this one is a completely different texture. Now I'm going to try and squeeze it, see if we can get a better sense. So, you see, it's just not, it's as pasty as it's crumbly. Pasty doesn't sound like a good word, does it? But it's pasty, which is actually really nice because it's going to be really smooth textured in the mouth. There you go. Okay. Now, the other thing we want to be paying attention to at this time is what the texture of the rind, the sort of rigidity of the rind. One can, I'm going to cut off a bit here because one can see all sorts of different rinds. Now, this being what's called candidum lead, as in penicillin candida, is much more in common with a camembert style rind, whereas the original Saint-Maur Touraine would have used a geotrichum, a yeasty kind of rind. That makes this much stronger. So I actually have to pull that apart, right? If that was a geotrichum rind, it would just fall apart because geotrichum is a single-celled mold or a yeast, and its structure is much less integrated with its neighbor. Whereas these molds, multicellular, they form much like a carpet or a cloth around the cheese. Much firmer kind of protection, and it makes the body of the cheese much better protected during maturation. So, and that is obviously a key thing. Now, one of the other things you'd expect, but we're not seeing here, is the degree of breakdown just inside the rind. So none of that. So this is just nice and young. So I'm going to have to taste that. All right. So always with these cheeses, I always think of it as a chalky, sticky texture. And you need to push it right around your teeth. It's delicious. Now, there are various theories as to why goat's cheese sometimes gets goaty. The one that I go to most is the way the milk itself has been physically manipulated. The more you push goat's milk around, the more likely you are to get billy goat type notes, right? Now, some people like that, and I've judged with French people who think, yes, that is the thing, I love that. Well, it reduces your market, let's be honest. Because lots of people find that a little bit over the top. It's like that smelly dog moment, except it's a smelly goat moment. Whereas if you treat the milk with intense care, as they do at Golden Cross, and very, very much a gentle aspect, and they talk about only ladling their curds into their molds, hand ladling, then you allow the goat's milk character rather than the goat's body character, the goatiness, to become dominant. And goat's milk is a wonderfully gentle, beautiful, elegant thing. And in that way, it's absolutely lovely. So I'm liking this. This is really good. Flavor-wise, there is a little bit of acidity. There's a little bit of there's some mild sweetness. There's no bitterness. The acidity is very low. The savouriness is very gentle, but it's there. And the acidity is very much. So it's pretty gentle across the board. But where it wins is the goat's milk as an elegant thing come across in the dairy notes. There's obviously a bit of yogurt there, as you would expect with a young cheese. And there's also a degree of sort of that cream cheese made with goat's milk. Beyond that, you're again getting a little bit of herbaceous bitterness and some of those herb notes. We're actually going quite herby. So maybe sort of thyme, clover, those kind of things, which are sitting in there. In fact, that very much that young grass kind of vibe, you know, that chomping on young grass, as I do on a Saturday. So that's really nice in there. So there's a much better, more even balance between the dairy and the follow-on flavors. So does this one go with a bit of bitter? That's delicious. I'm finding that I'm using the bitter rather than my saliva to masticate the goat's curd, and it's really resonating with the herbaceousness, and that's coming out really beautifully. It's got it almost giving it a baked cheese feel with almost like an Italian seasoning. That sounds like a weird thing to say, but that's sort of where I am. That's really lovely. Okay, note to self, use the beer to masticate. One of the things I always recommend to people, and I think you should really pay attention to this, is do it slowly. Get the full spectrum of the beer and the cheese, because sometimes the cheese is at its best at the end. Right, last one up. We have Pevensey Cheese Company. Now we have Martin and Hazel, a lovely couple. Martin was at Neal's Yard Dairy for many years, 15 years or something, very long time. And they got together and they started researching and they wanted to work together. And they say of their cheese-making enterprise that they wanted to do something that allowed their passion to be the full thing, the full part of their lives. So they became excellent in their own style. They looked at various options as to what kind of thing they want to do. They head down the blue cheese route. They then took on this idea of Stilton, but quite sensibly. And anybody who was either watched or was part of the Afternoon of the Year, was it 2 weeks ago now, would realize that those guys have been doing it a very long time, 150 or so years. And it's much harder than it looks, and you're never going to catch up with them. So they chose not to go down that route, and they have gone for a softer cheese. Now, this doesn't feel much like a softer cheese. So let's see what we've got going on here. So we've got small amounts of very clear blue, not sort of a spread through the web. And the pictures I've all looked at this. I have to say, this is the first time I've tasted this, by the way. The cheese images I've been looking at of this are all much the same. So some very characterful but infrequent blue lines. We can see from this it's not exactly a washed rind kind of vibe, but it almost is. It's got that almost Gorgonzola wet topography with blue colors, white colors and hints of blue, but it's not. So it sort of reminds me more of sort of a Cornish blue than a soft blue or a gooey blue. So it's going to go straight through the middle. And again, we've got some horizontal blueness, but otherwise you're seeing the holes where the vertical piercing has gone through. So they've obviously gone for vertical piercing. Vertical piercing is like Gorgonzola does from the top, and that's typical of soft blue cheeses, whereas Stilton is from the sides. When we were discussing this at the Afternoon of the Year, there was a lot of discussion about how many piercings you want to put in it. And the answer is you find out for yourself. Sometimes people do secondary piercings. That's delicious. Sorry, I went ahead and had some there. Apologies for that. So this one, the Artisan Cheese Awards, which is Matthew O'Callaghan's awards up in Melton Mowbray in 2022, last year. Now, to get really good marks at a competition like that, you have to be good. They've got very good judges there, and the cheeses at the Artisan Cheese Awards are a full representation of all the British and Irish artisan cheese. You occasionally get ones from overseas, but it's a very British focused orientation. The producers tend to be very small, and this perfectly suited to Pevensey Blue. Now, when we saw this, and I was there when they did this, I wasn't part of the final judging, but I was watching them do it. There is a need in those competitions, particularly the cheeses that are going right up to the last minute, the last set of judging, to have a bit of oomph, because the cheese palates, even of those experts around the room, may have become tired. You need something that continues to get your attention, and in humor terms, they've got to keep telling the good jokes. And what really helps is when you have a little bit of moisture in the cheese to allow the flavors to come forward more quickly. Because if you have to keep chewing cheeses like this, sometimes you're going, is it there? And actually, you're just not giving it the chance. And this is a moist cheese. You know what? It's got something in character. It's common with the Mayfield in some senses. It's a very simple dairy-based profile. But with this one, we've obviously got the blue that's coming forward. Now, as I don't know this cheese very well, I think I have to pay attention to the texture, because what you will see with mature bits, how am I going to do this and make it sense of it, is when is it going to go to a paste when you scrape it, or is it going to become crumbly? And it feels to me it's going to a paste, which usually is a very good sign. Crumbliness can be suggested early stage crumbly blues that can be a little bit acidic and or a little bit bitter, and this doesn't really have those things. I'm loving the way this is breaking down. It's almost spreadable, and the blue spiciness comes to the back. This is going to be the best pair with the beer, I'm sure. And it rises up through those creamy notes, some of those soft notes, and it's just comfortably loud. Is that fair? It's comfortably loud. It just says, I want your attention. I've got something really interesting to say. Right. So let's try it with a beer. So I'm going to cut this rind. All rind on these cheeses are technically edible, but I don't eat them. I will do it for curiosity purposes, maybe once, but as a rule, the flavor profile is so significantly different to the body of the cheese, and the body of the cheese is what you're interested in. So we're going to go in here. That's just lovely. That's just lovely. That's just lovely. That's just lovely. If there's something about beautiful flavors and tastes together that frees up your mind to think about other things. It just sits there as a kind of the backdrop of a beautiful moment, and you can talk to your friends. You find your hands start doing their own thing. They just reach out for more cheese or more beer, and it just sits there and sort of playing a little bit of orchestral music in the back of your mind. And this is doing that. These are absolutely classic combinations. And if you're doing this at home, do it slowly. Take your time. The beer is gentle. The cheese is elegant. No, do I like the word elegant? I don't think I do. The cheese is, what's a good word? The cheese is good company. That's what this cheese is. It's really good company. And you can just eat it, and it keeps telling more interesting flavors and wandering around and stops you, doesn't interrupt you, but doesn't let you lose focus on the fact that it tastes really, really good. And I like the soft texture. So describing as a soft cheese seems a bit of a reach. Gorgonzola Dolce is a soft cheese, but this is so much more elastic in texture than, say, a Stilton, which is much firmer to the touch and has that sort of either its crumbliness or its heritage of crumbliness very much more present. So this one is more pasty, more soft to taste. as I say, a bit more like that sort of Mayfield direction. So what do I think of my 3 Sussex cheeses? Well, I knew these cheeses were going to be good because I'm very familiar with 2 of them and heard the reputation of the Pevensey Blue extremely well. So I'm very pleased. We've got 3 small cheesemakers with very limited resources, plugging away at producing great cheese. You will meet the cheesemakers at the shows, you'll meet them at the markets, and they are producing, enough to make a living. These are not big industrial complexes at all. Harvey's, older game, more established, invested in property when property was cheap. So, they're established here. But nonetheless, they still remain very local to Sussex. And the Harvey's breweries and the beers are still very traditional in character, keeping the very best of British beer alive in the Sussex sense. So I'm going to say this has been a win. This has been a really good cheese board to enjoy. I hope that if you're tasting this, there's some comments there. I'm so bad at paying attention to things like that. It's an 18-kilo cheese. Thank you, Alison. James Grant. Hi, James. You're in the States. What are you doing there? Well, I hope you're having a good time in the States, leaning back into the UK. Nice to hear from you both. I should be on things like comments, shouldn't I? Right. So I'm going to wrap up. All I'm going to say is, James, when you come back, try these cheeses. Really good. Pevensey Blue. Pevensey Blue is stocked by Neal's Yard and Courtyard Dairy, people who are very discriminating about what they do and choose to do. So that's a real feather in its cap. Mayfield, much more broadly available. And Golden Cross, I actually don't know the availability of this, but I know it's really popular in this area. So I hope you can find it. It has a sister cheese, by the way, called Flower Marie, that was at my first wife's sister's wedding, which was the first time I discovered it. And that for a long time was one of my all-time favorite cheeses, the little Flower Marie, little square little goats, sheep's milk, sort of not quite a cube, but cubing. And when that's perfectly matured, it is just a stunning cheese. All right, that's enough for me. Have a lovely evening. I hope you've enjoyed this brief deep dive into 3 great Sussex cheeses. We are back in the 11th of July for Cornish cheeses. I'll be in Cornwall myself. It will also be my birthday. And so I've got 3 Cornish. We've got Bailati, we've got Cornish Jack, and we've got Cornish Gouda, right? Cornish Jack is a Padstow cheese made by the Padstow Cheese Company that's about, a quarter mile from the centre of Padstow. And Cornish Gouda, I've spoken to Giel before. He's a brilliant Dutch heritage cheesemaker a bit north of where we are in Padstow. So absolutely great cheeses. We'll be talking about them at length. I don't know at this time what beer we're going to have or drink or wine. There's some really nice wines coming out of things like the Camel Estuary, so maybe I'll choose one of them. If you want to come and take one of my courses, they are always worthwhile. I am always enthusiastic, and it's the best way to learn about cheese is to really get some oomph behind your presentations. So I hope that'll work for you. Otherwise, if you're in the trade, the International Cheese and Dairy Awards is this week. That's on this Thursday. And the follow-up and sister organisation, the Love Cheese Live, they're both in Stafford. That is on Friday and Saturday this week. So come and find us there if you're interested. I will be there having a good time. All right. See you soon. Have a lovely week.